I'm late.
In the sterile, controlled world of a maximum security prison, one expects order. It is a place where society sends its most dangerous individuals, removing them from the streets to prevent further harm. Yet, for Howard Smith, known as Hammo or P-Stone, the concrete walls and steel bars of his cell were not a cage. Instead, they became the headquarters of a sprawling and violent criminal enterprise. He was already serving a long sentence for murder, a man theoretically cut off from the world. But Smith had found a way to project his power far beyond the prison gates, reaching into the heart of Brooklyn's toughest neighborhoods with terrifying effect. This is the story of how one man, incarcerated and under constant surveillance, managed to lead a notorious street gang. He allegedly directed murders, orchestrated shootings, and controlled a lucrative drug trade, all while locked away. Smith's case pulls back the curtain on a disturbing reality within the American justice system. It shows how the influence of a charismatic and ruthless leader can transcend physical barriers. His story is not just about a single criminal, it is a window into the persistent and evolving challenge of prison gangs, a problem that law enforcement continues to grapple with across the country. The gang he commanded was the Brick Squad, a subset of the infamous Bloods. Under Smith's remote leadership, this group carved out a reputation for extreme violence. They were not just involved in petty crime, they were accused of waging war on rival gangs, settling scores with deadly force, and creating an atmosphere of fear in communities already struggling with violence. The indictment against Smith and his associates reads like a script from a gangster film, filled with code words, secret phone calls, and brutal acts of retribution. It paints a picture of a leader who demanded absolute loyalty and was willing to enforce it from hundreds of miles away. Understanding Howard Smith's reign is crucial for grasping the complexities of modern gang warfare. His ability to maintain control highlights a significant vulnerability: the flow of contraband, particularly cell phones, into correctional facilities. These devices become lifelines for incarcerated leaders, allowing them to function as if they were still on the street. As we delve into the methods Smith used, the crimes he allegedly ordered, and the investigation that finally exposed his network, we uncover a narrative that is both shocking and deeply informative. It is a stark reminder that a prison sentence does not always mean an end to a criminal career. Howard Smith was no stranger to the criminal justice system. Long before he became the alleged mastermind of the Brick Squad, he was a known figure in the violent underbelly of New York City. By the time he was indicted for running the gang from prison, he was already serving a sentence of 50 years to life for a murder conviction from 2005. This extensive experience with prison life gave him a unique perspective. He understood its hierarchies, its unwritten rules, and its hidden opportunities. For a man like Smith, incarceration was not an end, but a different kind of beginning, a place to consolidate power and build a new kind of empire. The Brick Squad, also known as the Immortal Stone Guerrilla Gang, or ISGG, emerged as a particularly aggressive faction within the larger Bloods network. This gang established its stronghold in the Brooklyn neighborhoods of Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brownsville, and East New York. These were areas where gang rivalries were fierce and territorial disputes were often settled with gunfire. The Brick Squad sought to dominate this landscape, and they needed a leader who was both respected and feared. From his prison cell, Howard Smith, or P-Stone, fit that role perfectly. His existing reputation for violence and his long sentence gave him a certain authority that others on the street could not match. Smith's leadership was not accidental, it was carefully cultivated. He leveraged his status as a lifer to project an image of unwavering commitment to the gang's cause. He couldn't be threatened with more prison time in the same way a street-level member could. This made him seem untouchable. He positioned himself as the godfather, the ultimate authority, whose word was law. Gang members on the outside looked to him for direction, for permission to act, and for resolution of internal disputes. His distance from the daily street conflicts paradoxically made him a more effective leader, an unseen puppet master pulling the strings from afar. The structure of the gang was hierarchical, with Smith at the very top. Below him were trusted lieutenants, some also incarcerated and others on the streets, who carried out his orders and managed the day-to-day operations. One such figure was Markel Pender, who, like Smith, allegedly helped run the gang from another prison. This network of command ensured that Smith's influence was felt throughout the organization. New recruits were initiated, rivals were targeted, and profits from criminal activities were collected and distributed, all under the watchful remote guidance of a man the system believed it had already neutralized. This was the foundation upon which his invisible empire was built. The primary tool of Howard Smith's reign was the illegal cell phone. In the hands of an incarcerated gang leader, a simple mobile device becomes a scepter of power. It shatters the isolation that prison is meant to create, providing a direct and unfiltered line of communication to the outside world. Authorities discovered that Smith was a prolific user of contraband phones, making hundreds of calls from various maximum security facilities, including the notorious Attica Correctional Facility. These were not casual conversations, they were business meetings, strategy sessions, and direct orders for acts of violence. The phone was his link to his criminal enterprise, his virtual office from which he ran the Brick Squad. Smith did not operate recklessly. He knew his calls could be monitored, so he and his members developed a sophisticated system of communication designed to evade law enforcement. This involved using multiple contraband phones, frequently changing numbers, and speaking in a heavily coded language. They created their own dialect, a lexicon of slang and veiled references that would sound like gibberish to an outsider. This coded speech was essential for discussing sensitive topics like drug sales, weapons, and planned attacks on rivals. It was a constant cat-and-mouse game, with Smith and his crew trying to stay one step ahead of any potential eavesdroppers. His control extended beyond just giving orders for violence. Smith also managed the gang's finances from his prison cell. The Brick Squad was a profitable enterprise, generating significant income from drug trafficking and robberies. Smith allegedly directed his members to deposit proceeds from these illegal activities into his personal prison commissary account. Financial records revealed that his account held over $25,000 at one point, a staggering sum for an inmate. This money was not just for personal comfort, it was a symbol of his power and a tool to maintain loyalty, reward followers, and fund the gang's operations. The organizational structure he commanded was designed for resilience. With lieutenants both inside and outside the prison system, the gang could continue to function even if some members were arrested. Smith's orders would be passed down the chain of command, ensuring that his plans were executed with precision. This decentralized yet centrally controlled model made the Brick Squad particularly dangerous. It was an organization that could absorb losses and adapt to law enforcement pressure, all while its ultimate leader remained safely ensconced behind prison walls, orchestrating the chaos from a distance, and proving that physical confinement was no obstacle to his will. The conversations between Howard Smith and his crew were a masterclass in criminal linguistics. To protect their operations, they used a complex system of codes that masked the true nature of their discussions. A gun might be referred to as a John or bitch, while acts of violence were cloaked in metaphorical language. An order to shoot someone might be disguised as an instruction to light him up or line him up. In one intercepted call, Smith's frustration with a member's hesitation was palpable. He reportedly demanded that the member commit an act of violence, threatening expulsion from the gang if the order was not followed. This demonstrated his absolute authority and the high stakes for disobedience. These coded communications were not just for show, they were a critical layer of security. Law enforcement investigators listening in on these calls faced the immense challenge of deciphering this unique dialect. It required not only linguistic expertise but also a deep understanding of the gang's internal culture and ongoing conflicts. For example, rivals might be called ops, meaning opposition, or referred to by derogatory nicknames. Money from drug sales could be called bread or paper. Each phrase was part of a carefully constructed puzzle, and solving it was key to understanding the gang's criminal conspiracies and preventing future violence on the streets of Brooklyn. The content of these calls revealed the inner workings of Smith's mind and his leadership style. He was not a distant, hands-off leader. He was intimately involved in the gang's affairs, micromanaging disputes and personally sanctioning acts of retaliation. In one chilling call from 2018, he allegedly referred to himself as the Godfather while giving explicit instructions to a subordinate. This self-aggrandizing title was more than just ego, it was a declaration of his role as the ultimate arbiter of life and death for the gang. His words, transmitted over a smuggled phone, carried the weight of a death sentence. The contraband phones themselves were a constant source of power. Getting these devices into a maximum security prison is a difficult and risky endeavor, often involving corrupt staff, visitors, or elaborate smuggling methods. For Smith, maintaining a steady supply of phones and SIM cards was a top priority. It was his lifeline to power, the tool that allowed him to project his authority beyond the prison walls. The very presence of these phones inside facilities like Attica highlights a systemic failure, a crack in the fortress that leaders like Smith are all too willing and able to exploit for their own violent ends. Under Howard Smith's remote command, the Brick Squad allegedly unleashed a wave of violence across Brooklyn. The gang's activities were not random. They were part of a calculated campaign to expand their territory, eliminate rivals, and enforce their dominance. The indictment against Smith and his crew detailed a horrifying list of crimes, including multiple murders and shootings that terrorized entire communities. These acts were often carried out in broad daylight, a brazen display of power meant to send a clear message to their enemies and to the neighborhoods they sought to control. The streets became a chessboard, and Smith was moving the pieces from his cell. One of the most brutal crimes linked to Smith's orders was the murder of 18-year-old Claudel Gary in April 2018. The shooting was the culmination of a year-long feud with a rival family. Authorities alleged that Smith, communicating from prison, gave the green light for the attack. The killing was a stark example of how personal vendettas, amplified by gang loyalty, could escalate into deadly violence under his leadership. It demonstrated that no one was safe from the gang's reach, and that Smith's influence was powerful enough to compel his followers to commit the ultimate crime on his behalf. The violence was not limited to rival gang members. The indictment also detailed 5 other shootings that resulted in injuries to 7 individuals, some of whom were innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. These indiscriminate acts of violence show the devastating collateral damage of the Brick Squad's war. A dispute between 2 gangs could erupt into gunfire on a busy street, endangering the lives of ordinary citizens. This created a pervasive climate of fear in neighborhoods like Bedford-Stuyvesant and Brownsville, where the sound of gunshots became an all-too-common occurrence, and residents lived with the constant threat of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Another murder highlighted the gang's internal code of silence and retribution. The indictment accused the gang of killing John Fernandez, one of their own members, in December 2017. Fernandez was suspected of cooperating with law enforcement, a betrayal that in the world of the Brick Squad was punishable by death. This killing served as a chilling warning to everyone within the organization. Disloyalty would not be tolerated. It reinforced Smith's control, proving that his authority was absolute and that he could enforce his rules with lethal finality, even against his own followers. The message was clear. Allegiance to Peastone was a matter of life and death. Violence was the Brick Squad's most visible tool, but drug trafficking was its financial engine. The gang ran a sophisticated and expansive narcotics operation that generated the cash needed to fund their activities, purchase weapons, and enrich their leaders. Their primary products were heroin, often dangerously laced with fentanyl, crack cocaine, and marijuana. These drugs were not just sold on their home turf in Brooklyn. The gang was ambitious, expanding its distribution network to new markets. They established operations in upstate New York, specifically in Binghamton, and even reached as far as Bangor, Maine, turning the Brick Squad into a multi-state enterprise. This expansion was a strategic move orchestrated from behind bars. Howard Smith allegedly saw an opportunity to increase profits by tapping into markets where demand was high and competition was less fierce than in New York City. He used his network of members on the outside to transport and distribute the drugs, managing the logistics through his contraband cell phones. This demonstrated a level of business acumen that went beyond typical street-level dealing. Smith was not just a gang leader, he was the CEO of a criminal corporation, constantly looking for ways to grow his market share and maximize his revenue streams. The profits from this drug trade flowed directly back to the gang's leadership. As previously mentioned, a significant portion of the money was funneled into the prison commissary accounts of Howard Smith and his incarcerated lieutenant, Markel Pender. This financial arrangement was a key part of the power structure. It allowed Smith to live more comfortably in prison, but more importantly, it was a tangible measure of his success and control. The flow of cash was a constant reminder to his followers of who was in charge and who was benefiting most from their illicit labor on the streets. The social cost of this drug enterprise was immense. The heroin and fentanyl sold by the Brick Squad contributed to the devastating opioid crisis, fueling addiction and causing overdose deaths in the communities they infiltrated. In neighborhoods already plagued by violence and poverty, the gang's drug trade added another layer of despair. They were not just selling a product, they were selling poison, and the profits they reaped came at the direct expense of the health and well-being of countless individuals. The violence of the gang was loud and explosive, but the quiet devastation of their drug business was just as destructive. The reign of Howard Smith and the Brick Squad did not go unnoticed. The NYPD and the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office were keenly aware of the escalating violence in Brooklyn and began to piece together the puzzle. They launched a long-term, intensive investigation codenamed Operation Brick. Its goal was to dismantle the gang from the top down, starting with its incarcerated leader. This was no simple task. It required a combination of old-fashioned police work and sophisticated modern surveillance techniques to penetrate the gang's secretive and violent world. A cornerstone of the investigation was electronic surveillance. Investigators secured warrants to wiretap the contraband phones that Smith was using inside prison. For months, they listened in on his calls, painstakingly recording and analyzing hours of conversations. This was where they began to crack the gang's complex codes. By cross-referencing the coded language with real-world events, such as shootings or arrests, they slowly built a dictionary of the Brick Squad's secret dialect. These wiretaps provided prosecutors with direct evidence of Smith's leadership, capturing his voice as he allegedly ordered hits, managed drug deals, and berated his subordinates. Financial tracking was another critical component of the operation. Investigators followed the money trail, uncovering the scheme to funnel drug proceeds into Smith's and Pender's commissary accounts. By subpoenaing prison financial records, they could directly link the illicit activities on the street to the gang leaders in their cells. This evidence was crucial in proving that Smith was not just a passive figurehead, but an active beneficiary and manager of a criminal enterprise. The large sums of money in his account told a clear story of a leader profiting from the crimes he ordered his followers to commit. After months of meticulous evidence gathering, the authorities were ready to strike. In December 2019, the Brooklyn District Attorney announced a sweeping 77-count indictment against Smith and 9 other members of the Brick Squad. The charges were severe, including conspiracy, murder, attempted murder, and numerous weapons and drug offenses. The arrests were a major blow to the gang, decapitating its leadership and removing key players from the streets. Operation Brick was a significant victory for law enforcement, showcasing how a determined and multifaceted investigation could successfully target and neutralize a gang leader, even one hidden behind the walls of a maximum security prison. The case of Howard Smith is more than just a story about one man's criminal ingenuity. It is a powerful illustration of a systemic problem plaguing correctional facilities across the United States. The ability of an inmate to lead a violent street gang from a maximum security prison exposes a critical vulnerability in the justice system. Prisons are designed to isolate and incapacitate dangerous individuals, but the proliferation of contraband cell phones has turned many of these facilities into permeable fortresses. For leaders like Smith, a phone transforms a prison cell from a place of punishment into a remote command center. This issue is not unique to New York. Prison gangs have long been a feature of the American carceral landscape, but technology has amplified their reach and effectiveness. In the past, communication with the outside world was slow and easily monitored, relying on coded letters or messages passed through visitors. Today, smartphones offer instant encrypted communication through apps, texts, and social media, making it easier than ever for incarcerated leaders to manage criminal enterprises in real time. They can organize drug shipments, order retaliatory hits, and engage in witness intimidation with the tap of a screen, posing a significant threat to public safety. Correctional authorities are fighting an uphill battle against this technological tide. They employ a range of tools to combat contraband, including cell phone detectors, body scanners, and signal jamming technology. However, these measures are often expensive and can be circumvented by determined and creative inmates and their outside accomplices. The constant demand for these devices creates a lucrative black market within prisons, sometimes involving corrupt staff who are bribed to smuggle them in. As long as inmates are willing to pay a high price for a connection to the outside, the supply chain will be difficult to break completely. The Howard Smith case forced a renewed focus on this persistent problem. Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez explicitly stated that the indictment highlighted the urgent need to stop the flow of cell phones into prisons. It served as a wake-up call, demonstrating that simply locking someone up is not enough if they can continue their criminal conduct unabated. The challenge requires a multi-pronged approach: better screening technologies, stricter penalties for smuggling, and intelligence-gathering operations that focus on an inmate's virtual activities as much as their physical ones. It is a complex issue at the intersection of technology, security, and criminal justice. The indictment of Howard Smith and the Brick Squad marked a significant moment for New York City. It was a clear victory for law enforcement, demonstrating that no one, not even a so-called godfather behind bars, is beyond the reach of justice. The operation successfully dismantled a violent organization that had terrorized Brooklyn neighborhoods, bringing a measure of relief to residents who had lived under the shadow of the gang's violence. The case sent a powerful message to other gangs. Leadership from prison does not grant immunity, and authorities are actively developing the tools to listen in and build a case, no matter where you are. The primary lesson from the Smith saga is the undeniable threat posed by contraband cell phones in prisons. His ability to orchestrate murder and run a multi-state drug operation from his cell underscores a critical security failure. The case highlighted the urgent need for correctional systems to invest in more effective technologies and strategies to detect and block illicit communications. It proved that a simple cell phone can be as dangerous as any weapon, turning a prison sentence into a mere inconvenience for a determined criminal mastermind. Public safety demands that the walls of a prison are not just physical, but also digital. Furthermore, the case provides valuable insight into the structure and resilience of modern street gangs. The Brick Squad operated as a sophisticated network, with a clear hierarchy and a diversified criminal portfolio. Smith's leadership style, blending charisma with ruthless enforcement, shows how a single individual can inspire both loyalty and fear to maintain control over a large group. Understanding these dynamics is essential for law enforcement agencies seeking to disrupt and dismantle similar organizations. It is not enough to arrest street-level members. The entire network, especially its leadership, must be targeted. Ultimately, the story of Howard Smith is a cautionary tale. It reveals the persistent and adaptive nature of organized crime and the continuous need for vigilance from the justice system. While Operation Brick was a success, the conditions that allowed Smith to thrive still exist. As long as there are profits to be made from crime and leaders willing to direct it, new figures will inevitably try to fill the void. The legacy of Howard Smith is a stark reminder that the fight against gang violence is an ongoing battle, one that must be fought with intelligence, technology, and an unwavering commitment to protecting communities from harm. If you want to know more about the true stories behind New York's most notorious gangs, hit that subscribe button, because in the world of true crime, the truth is never simple, and it's never safe.